Uh, Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of our podcast series, Product Perspective Talks. In this series, we speak with different product managers across the globe and try to understand the world of product management, how it is evolving, and what are the different aspects of product management in today's day and age. And today, we have with us Dea Mandija. She's a product manager at Communardo Software at Albania. So, hi Dia, thank you so much for joining us today, and a very warm welcome to you. How are you?
Hi, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure being here. I'm doing quite well. The weather is quite nice, as you may see from the light coming in. So, um, yeah, I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Great, thank you so much. Before we begin and before we dive deep into the topic of our discussion, that is product management, let me begin asking you, like, what led you to become a product manager? Did it happen accidentally or you planned for it?
Yeah, so I'd say my career has been quite diverse, even though I'd consider myself pretty young to a degree. I studied computer science here in Albania at the Faculty of Tirana. And by the end of my second year of university, I wanted to get some hands-on experience. So I started a web development internship in a startup company here. And by the end of that internship, I quickly realized that even though I really liked the tech industry, I loved a lot of subjects that I was studying as well. When it came to actually coding and programming, I didn't really have that passion or drive to work hands-on with code. I really liked a lot of concepts regarding coding and programming, but not enough to, let's say, work on it. I couldn't see myself work on it full time. So I continued working with the company because thankfully they really liked me and I needed a full-time job because I also wanted to be able to work whilst also studying. So I started working at a company doing a lot of project management related tasks. So because it was a startup, I got to wear a lot of hats per se. So I got to do work with development teams and do user manuals, do user interviews, support the team with testing processes. So anything that you can think of, even social media management and things like that. I think it was very dynamic as an experience. And I think the best thing that came out of it was this idea that I got to work with different digital products at different stages in various industries. So we did allied healthcare, we did education, we did e-commerce. So I think that was the right boost that I needed to sort of get my feet into the product management mindset. Let's put it that way. So after 3 years plus, I'd say, in that company, I started at another company, which is Communardo Products or Communardo Software, where I'm currently working, and started here as a product manager. So my focus, let's say, switched a little bit, and I started working with Atlassian and Microsoft integration and add-ons. So the Atlassian ecosystem, as you may already know, have a lot of products, and what we do is we create add-ons or integration based on those existing ecosystems. So products for Jira, products for Confluence, product for Teams, for example. And yeah, I've been working with Communardo for about 1 year and 7 months, and it's been a great experience. Yeah, it's been a very awesome experience. Apart from that, I've also tried to undertake as many initiatives as possible. I'm also currently co-funding a company with one of my closest friends, which does data analytics for e-commerce businesses. So
that's great to hear.
me.
So that's quite a great portfolio to have. Like, you have a wide range of experiences during your relatively short career. So that's really great to know. So talking about product management, in specific, like, one of the most important aspects of product management is that product discovery. Like, you have to discover the avenues in which you can grow your product in. So how does that work for you? Like, is there any specific tools or techniques that you use for this?
Yeah, I think product discovery is this very big subject. There's so many things involved in it, but the best way that I think I've heard it framed from other industry leaders as well is especially the way that Silicon Valley Product Group and Marty Keegan talk a lot about it. So it's this process of really understanding four big risks when you undertake any, let's say, product challenge or any new product ideas or anything like that. So you want to understand, first of all, if users will buy or use a particular product. So that's a lot to do with like the value of that initiative. Secondly, you're also trying to understand if they can use it, which goes into usability. And here you really need a lot of support from product designers or UX researchers and things like that. Next, you're trying to understand if it's feasible. So whatever idea or whatever initiative you're undertaking, if it's actually doable from a technical perspective, if you can actually create it. So that's a lot to do with can we build it and this technical feasibility understanding. And last but definitely not least is this question of will this thing actually work for our business? So is this viable in the future and within our business strategy? So I think whatever process you undertake when it comes to product discovery, those are the four big questions that you're trying to sort of understand and learn more about as you go through that process. And then for the techniques themselves, obviously you have to go through certain stages. So first you have to frame or really understand the problem that you're trying to solve. Of course, we're all aware of this idea that customers typically will come to you with feature ideas or will come with solutions as to a problem that you're trying to solve. However, that's not always the problem that you're trying to solve. There's a lot of underlying issues behind it, and there's a lot of things that come with like biases or ideas that the users can come up with. So in the beginning of this discovery process, I think you're really trying to understand or frame the problem in a way that works for you. Then you can plan about it. Then you can come into this ideation idea where you really ideate or iterate on how that problem can be solved. Then you work with prototypes. So whether they're low fidelity prototypes or I don't know, prototypes that you can use in user testing and things like that. So you really want to have something tangible when it comes to actually testing that idea or seeing how it would look either to customers or even to your team yourself. Lastly, I would say a lot of testing. So that's key when it comes to this product discovery process. You want to test often and you want to test early. So whether you want to use like qualitative testing, quantitative testing with A/B testing, and most importantly, demand testing. So whatever you're trying to develop, does it have demand? Does it fit with your product? Does it fit with your strategy? So I think those are some of the big questions that you really want to address whilst you go through this discovery process. There's various tools that you can use. And there's so many like industry leaders that talk a lot about processes that you can do. We've used design sprints within our company, which became very popular by Google as well. There's those 5-day sprints where you go through all those processes day by day. We've used opportunity maps from which Teresa Torres talks a lot about. So we've used very different, let's say, tools in that regard. And when it comes to like actual digital tools, I'd say anything involving a whiteboard, like a mural or whatever. So anything where you can just, I don't know, split out ideas and discuss and really brainstorm. Yeah. Yeah. So definitely anything like that. Sketching tools that are easy to use. I've used many. In the beginning, I used Excalibur, which is a tool that I really like because it's the easiest to just sketch out things. It's like using paper and pen, but you're just doing it in a digital way. But I think tools are like the means, and what you're really trying to understand is what process fits the best for you.
Okay, that's great. So one point really stood out for me that you mentioned about the user the feature requests that your users or your customers that come up. And even I have realized that within our products here at Amoeboids, most of the times when the customers come up with their queries or their feature requests or suggestions, they are backed by their own narrative, and that
Yes.
not fit or all other users that are using your tool. So as a product manager or as someone who is looking into those feedback, you have to be very cautious and careful. Means on one side, you have to satisfy your customer, you have to build for them, definitely as per their needs. At the same time, you also have to take care that you just don't try to narrow down the scope of the product in order to just satisfy one specific set of users. So you have to take in all those aspects into account while designing any feature or any direction where you are going your product in. So like you mentioned, like as a product manager, it's a multifaceted role. So you have to don different hats.
Most
And
definitely.
and most of the times means there are whole lot of memes out there about what product managers really do, because people generally get confused like what these guys really do. And one of the most important aspects of product management is like working with different stakeholders. So whether it is an internal stakeholder or external stakeholder, there are so many around you. Like you have your product team, your development team, your QA team inside, your leadership team, and then outside you have your users, sponsors, and a whole lot of external vendors and something like that. So working with so many stakeholders, how do you balance their needs, their priorities, while making your product decisions?
That's definitely a very important point. I think it's very important also to understand where these stakeholders fit. As you mentioned, there's a lot of categories when it comes to working with your actual product team. So there's sort of a stakeholder that you need to manage and work on and collaborate with. You have your end users and your customers, who are people who actually interact with the product on a more deeper level. And then you might also have leadership, shareholders, or people that are more concerned mostly with the vision and business side. So I think whenever you talk to specific people or specific customers, it's very important to understand what type of language they're expecting. So you're not going to use the same language that you use with, let's say, leadership, and use that same language with like actual customers that use your product. And that also is very important when it comes to like prioritization. I think especially, and here I'm going to focus on like leadership and shareholders and people within your company or internal stakeholders. It's very important to have a very clear vision and vision narrative as to where you see your product going or what your product is trying to fulfill. There's different ways that you can communicate that. So I'd say the most important aspect first would be to actually sort of write down who your stakeholders are. So really understand who they are and how they affect, or what sort of let's say, linking they have within your company. It's also very important to understand what their stakes are in regards to the product. So what are they after? What's most important for them? Is it just to have a profitable business, or is it also like the proper vision strategy in the future for the product as well, which most probably it will be. And then to really understand what sort of framework or what sort of let's say communications that would work for them. We know that stakeholders are very busy. We as product managers are very busy. One of the main jokes is that we spend all of our time in meetings. So it's very important to find a format that works for the both of you. So you can communicate your decisions and your visions as early as possible, and also have them challenged as early as possible. You don't want to spend 2 months or so working on an initiative that stakeholders or leadership don't even support. You need to really understand how to get leadership buy-in on all your, let's say, decisions or all the things that you're working on. So that would be, I'd say, some of the learnings that I've had ever since I started as well. So fit with communication style, depending on who you're talking about, and then really do your homework properly in order to share why you're doing a certain decision and how it affects that particular stakeholder.
Great. So that's really apt. One thing that I would like to add here is that one thing I have realized over the years is that while working with different stakeholders, one quality that really helps you to get through is empathy. So if you can, step into the shoes of your stakeholder, even though it's not always possible, but you just have to think from their point of view while, approaching or any problem or any issue or any communication with them. That makes really difference because many times you come across some conflicting situations. So for example, there is some trending feature that is there being offered by all your competitors and all your customers are also demanding for it. And somehow your team says that no, it's not possible in the current state of architecture that we have. So
Yeah.
have you faced any such kind of conflicting situation? And if yes, then how did you handle that?
So I think when it comes to conflict resolution, that's something that product managers really need to tackle in the best way possible. There's always going to be conflicts when it comes to what the product team wants, or if there's like an alignment or a synergy with what customers are requesting and what the business lines or the leadership are requesting. I think the best way to handle it is to first, again, with the homework part, do your homework and really understand what the current situation is. So get all the data that you can on what the conflict is actually about. If this is about actually investing in an initiative or not, then get all the data that you need in order to understand what that initiative is, how will it impact customers or the business, what are the risks that are underlying with regards to it. And then I think the best way in order to resolve any like conflict or any, I wouldn't say proper conflict because you're not going to fight in the workplace, but any like topics that have question marks with regards to them is to also be as communicative as possible with all the parties that are involved. So to not let any like page unturned and to really go through all the details of what each of these let's say paths that we can take will impact the business. But I'd say data communication and being very transparent when it comes to what the effects of a proper solution will take are the most important aspects of that.
All right. So you talked about data, gathering data about that thing. You these days there is a general, people generally say that data is a new oil kind of thing. So what do you think? Like how the day in today's world data plays, what role data actually plays in the world of product management? Like how do you use data to make your product decisions?
Oh yeah, that's one of the most important things. So you mentioned the oil sentence. I've also heard something along the lines of if you're not coming with data to a conversation, you're just one other person with an opinion. So I think it rings true in many cases. Data is very, very important, especially in the role of a product manager. So whether that's feedback data, so information that you're getting from your customer, whether that's metrics or KPIs, whether it's data that is coming from different sources when it comes to how your customers are behaving with your product, they're very, very important. It can be overwhelming, especially when it comes to properly processing that data and really sort of identifying what metrics and what KPIs are important to you. And that will depend on the product. It will depend on the stage and on many other things. But I'd say the most important aspect of product management really is to be able to understand, learn about data, learn about the industry, learn about where your product currently is, how are other players dealing with specific things. So you're like a data feeding machine, but you're also trying to sort of analyze it in a way that really makes sense and becomes actionable. I think another aspect is that there's a lot of biases that could come with data as well. You really need to have a strong understanding of what it means when you look at a specific behavior in a graph, or even when you notice a specific behavior. Oftentimes, if you are lucky enough to have like a data science team or something like that, that can be very helpful because they can help you understand or track a certain behavior. But it's also very important to get knowledgeable and really learn how to work and properly read data in a way that makes sense.
So have you been through a situation like, I have already also faced that, like many times you go with your gut feelings, like as a product manager, having, used your product yourself so many times and having spoken to many users and stakeholders. you generally feel that there is a certain way in which users are using your product. And when you actually look into the data, sometimes the data surprises you, and your assumptions are probably not on the mark. So, how do you counter that situation? Like, what course correction that you have to do in such situations?
Oh, definitely. I think especially because we as a team with one of the products that we have at Communardo, we very recently also included insights within our product, which means that we could now track how our users were properly behaving within the product when they were, I don't know, what items they were clicking or how they were behaving, how they were interacting with the feature, which is definitely very important. And throughout that process, we understood that many, or not many, but some of the assumptions that we had made beforehand when it comes to um, which features were mostly used or which were more popular or how users were behaving were not always fully correct. And yeah, that comes a lot with this idea with why data is important, because it shows you the hard facts. I think, and to get back to the question of how do you handle that, I think that this process of discovery is very important because there's basically two tracks. So you have discovery and you have delivery. In the discovery process, I think it's not only okay, but it should be pushed in order to have as much experimentation as possible. So the common ground is that you might fail throughout that process because you're basically doing bets and by hypothesis on certain topics. And then there's a delivery. That's obviously the process when you actually have settled on a specific problem that you're solving, you know how to solve it, and it's mostly about implementation. So I think having that distinction between um, being in that discovery process of we're now experimenting and we're throwing out ideas and we're trying to solve the best possible thing is very important. And it also can help with sort of understanding that there's not always a correct way forward, and you need to iterate on ideas and on things that you're trying to solve.
Definitely. One thing I would like to add one here is that when you talk about data, I get asked this question many times, like, how do you use data, or how do you analyze data, and you absolutely make use of it while making product decisions. But it's not always right versus right or right versus wrong kind of a situation. Sometimes you cannot make decisions only based on the data. So you have to apply different type of knowledge altogether. So you have communications with your stakeholders, you have interactions with your end users. You generate some knowledge out of that. You look at your customer tickets, what sort of issues that they are facing. Then you get some knowledge out of that, and then there is a data which gives you the user behavior. And then there is some, market research data which gives you the trends that are going on about the competitors and what they are doing in this space.
Yeah.
So all the decisions that at the end of the day you make are, amalgamation of all these knowledge points that you have gathered from different parts of the product management space. So it's not just like one way that, these are the steps and you just have to follow that. So it's over the period with the experience, you generate your own theory to do all these things. So moving ahead, any latest trends that you're following in the product space? Like,
definitely a lot. I'm a bit of a nerd when it comes to finding like influencers and people within the product space and really talking them or really being up to date with them. I think we live in a world where currently there's so much knowledge and so much information out there. Some of my favorite like influencers that have been since I very much started my career. I think Marty Kagan is like a common for anyone in the product space, particularly with the Silicon Valley product group and anyone within that realm. Teresa Torres that I mentioned, Melissa Perry, who I really like. I've started listening to Lenny's podcast, and I think that's been a very interesting take. He really invites a lot of interesting people in his podcast to talk about different digital products from various industries. And they talk about so many cool things like monetization or, I don't know, habits or design topics, whatever you want to think about. Yeah, and one suggestion or one thing that I try to do is get involved in as many communities as possible. So whether that's social media or online, I recently and very thankfully got accepted into Reforge, which is this community for tech product managers.
Okay.
And the membership is actually paid. So it's being paid by my company or financed by my company. But even if it weren't, so for the free version, I think they offer a lot of like cool and in-depth information when it comes to proper product management, things that you need to know or topics that you need to be aware of. And yeah, last there's also like a newsletter that I really, really like, which is called Technically.
Okay.
As I mentioned, I very briefly was in the world of like tech or programming, but I'm still very interested in it. And I think you need to have a lot of tech knowledge in order to work in our industry. So what technically does is that it takes very complex topics and it breaks them down or explains them as if you were like in the most basic way possible, not as if you were a 5-year-old, but I'd say very similar to that. And I really enjoy that because I think there's so many topics and things with technology happening at all times. So that really helps me stay up to date with it all.
Great. These are definitely really great recommendations. One recommendation that I would like to add here is that if you are on Twitter or LinkedIn, you must also
Yeah.
follow a guy called Shreyas Doshi.
Yeah.
You must have heard about him, right?
Yeah. On
That's
Twitter, he's very popular as well.
really like anyone in the product space must be following him. So he's a really great guy. Great insights and different models that he generally talk about in the product management and in general leadership in general. So
Definitely. Yeah. John Cutler as well. I just remembered him. He talks so much, but I think whenever I read, like, especially his blogs, I feel like I've gained IQ levels every time. He's very wise, I'd say.
Great. So one thing that I would like to ask Dia is that how do you look at this buzz around generational AI, the tools like ChatGPT, Bard that are coming up? Like there are two aspects that I want to ask about. Like one thing is that as a product manager, now it's inevitable that over the period next few couple of years, earlier there was a question like, does your product use AI or not? But I believe that down the line, 2 years, 3 years, nobody's going to ask you that question because everyone is going to use AI. So the next question would be like, how deep you are using AI? So one question is from that perspective, like how to use these technologies to make your product smarter and go deeper into AI. And second thing, as an individual, as a product manager, do you feel threatened by these technologies, or you see that we can survive with them?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's two aspects to it. So first of all, I think what's very cool, what has happened with AI is this fact that it's now very democratized. So it's not like this technology didn't exist before or the companies that are working with it didn't work with it before. It's just that the way that it's now being distributed to everyone is so much more available to everyone. So there's like this boom of ideas and obviously also copycats and products that just claim to use AI but actually don't. So I think that's very cool as a first step. I think when it comes to this whole concept of AI taking our jobs or anything like that, uh, there's so much going into that I could talk about. But I'd say the main thing is that first we need to understand how to make it work for us, particularly coming from a product management perspective. There's a lot of tasks involved in our day-to-day that aren't really focused on like meaningful work per se. So they're either communication tasks or tasks that are very repetitive and could be automated. And I think this is a place where AI or particularly ChatGPT, for example, can come very in handy. I've even used it a lot of times when it comes to, could you write this in a nicer way, or could you phrase this in a way that is more understandable to this user persona or anything like that. So I think it's definitely very helpful in many cases, and you need to be very aware of sort of how to talk to it, or what kind of prompts to use in it in order for it to make it work for you. But I think there's aspects that can definitely not be, let's say, recreated with AI when it comes to what our role is and what we do. So we our main thing is to make sure that our products are viable and that they're valuable to users and buyers. And that's something that you cannot definitely recreate with AI every time. There's so many leverages that go into our day-to-day work, from team empowerment to leadership and stakeholder buy-in and management that we've mentioned before, to making sure that the vision that we're working for also works with the business. So there's many aspects that I think aren't replicable. I also saw, I think something that made the buzz in the design and UX research community was this digital product that basically claimed that you wouldn't need users anymore in order to do UX research. You could just use this tool, which that's not the goal of UX research at all. If we would use AI in order to do user research, what would be the point? It's not the same as actually talking to users who have their own world and their own humanity. And yeah, that's a very convoluted way of saying that. I think it's a very complex topic, but I think we can learn from it a lot, and also make it used to our advantage.
Yeah, that's definitely true. One thing that I have realized that the pace at which these things are changing, it's sometimes very overwhelming. Like you can't keep up with it. You start exploring one tool, and by the time you are confident about it, there are 10 new tools which are
Yeah.
more advanced are there in the market. But having said that, like you mentioned, you can definitely still make use of these tools and make your life easy. Like for example, in my case, I'm not really good at writing things. Like, I definitely can write things, but what tools like ChatGPT has helped me is to draft my requirements or my release notes or my documentation things in a much more creative and much more innovative way. So definitely these are smaller tasks which are repetitive in nature, might not be very value addition that they're going to do in your day-to-day development. So you can definitely put these tools to task and get your work done from them, and you can focus on the more job of a product manager, which help you to grow your product, give you more leverage within your organization. So I think that's how we should go ahead. In fact, with this experience, we actually end up integrating ChatGPT within our tool called automated release notes for Jira. So it can actually it can actually now read your Jira tickets and come up with the release notes for those stories. So this is how I think we're going to move ahead in the world. So
that's awesome. I really like that.
So with this, I think, Dea, it's been a great experience talking to you. I think a lot of insights that I personally got to learn from you, and I'm sure our audiences must have got from this discussion. Any other remarks, any comments that you want to make?
First of all, thank you for inviting me, and thank you for the very lovely comments by the end. I really enjoyed the conversation, and likewise, I think I got to learn a lot from it. I'd say keep doing these, because I always find conversations within our industry so insightful and so helpful, and especially the ones within the Atlassian ecosystem. I think there's a lot of potential there when it comes to which voices could be heard and should be heard. So congrats on your initiative as well.
Thank you so much, and great talking to you. Thanks for joining us today, and to all our audiences who are listening out there, thank you so much for listening this session. And for more such episodes of this podcast series, do follow us on LinkedIn, subscribe to our YouTube channel. And we also run another podcast series called the Release Notes, the Expert Perspectives, where we generally talk with different people from the world of technical writing about the profession of technical writing in general, and the release notes to be specific. So do follow us for more such insightful videos, and have a nice day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.